Welcome to the family of tales from the page, to the enchanting world of legends, forgotten pages, and whispered stories when shadows fall and lamps go out. Here, epics forgotten on the dusty shelves of time, the darkest corners of the human mind, and that unique atmosphere where reality and myth intertwine come back to life. If you also believe in the power of words and want to get lost with us in those deep, breathless adventures hidden behind every single page, you are in the right place. If you enjoy this journey, you can help the algorithm recommend more of such quality content to you by liking our video and subscribing to our channel. You can also turn on the notification bell to be the first to know about my new content and join us in every new episode of this dark and cinematic library.
Chapter Y: Eris, the Golden Apple, and the Arbitration Time. It all began in those ancient ages when human memory was lost amidst grains of sand, and the gods directly intervened in the fates of mortals. While humans were just learning to work iron and build palaces by carving stones that reached for the skies, the Olympians watching this small blue planet from the throne of the heavens were enchanted by their own perfection and magnificence. In that era, even rivers had their own gods. Fairies whispered on mountain slopes, and the universe rested upon a divine balance. On that day, within the magnificent golden-pillared palaces of Olympus built above the clouds, there was a massive wedding preparation. Peleus, a mortal king known throughout the land for his virtue and honesty, was marrying Thetis, the delicate, pure beauty, immortal goddess of the seas. This was a rare, unusual, and dangerous union of heaven and earth, of mortal and immortal in history. From all four corners of the world, all gods, sea nymphs, mountain nymphs, and mortal kings had flocked to the celebration area for this magnificent feast. Ambrosias were poured at the feast tables, nectars flowed like rivers, and sounds of joy overflowing from golden cups made the celestial dome ring. Everyone was happy. Everyone was at peace. Or so they thought for that moment. There was a single person whose name was intentionally forgotten on the guest list of that perfect banquet. A single person whose very mention was considered bad luck. The goddess of discord, unrest, insidious plans, and deep chaos, Eris. Eris came right up to the door of the banquet hall with that poisonous and burning anger of being excluded by the other gods, of not being deemed worthy of that magnificent table. She was not allowed inside by the guards, and she did not want to enter that cheerful crowd anyway. She simply rolled a flawless, shining apple made of the purest gold, which she held between her fingers, right into the middle of the goddesses where laughter and magnificence prevailed. The golden apple rolled forward, clicking over the marble floor, and stopped in the middle of the tables. The single sentence engraved upon the flawless curves of the apple was a spark that would set the entire world on fire and turn civilizations to ashes, to the fairest. Those two words, that short yet poisonous sentence, were enough to shatter the peaceful, flawless appearance of Olympus in a single instant. Laughter ceased, and the sounds of wine spilling from goblets ended in a freezing silence, while the golden apple glistened in the middle of the hall an ice-cold tension, and then an inevitable contest of vanity began among the goddesses. Each of them argued that perfection and magnificence belonged solely to herself in the universe. According to each of them, that apple belonged to the sole owner of beauty in the universe, namely, rightfully and exclusively to herself. But while everything was up in smoke, all the other gods stepped back, because three mighty goddesses stepped onto the stage, proudly separating themselves from all other divine beings, standing at the head of the apple and putting forth that claim that would shake thrones. Hera, the queen of the supreme gods, the symbol of power, the throne, might, and sacred marriage. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, justice, clever maneuvers, and righteous war. And Aphrodite, the crownless queen of love that captivates hearts, intoxicating desire, passion, and flawless allure. The quarrel grew, the voices of the immortals echoed in the mountains, and the joy of the feast suddenly turned into a dark and suffocating storm. Even the gods were forced to take sides in this massive rivalry. Some found Hera right, some praised Athena's intelligence, while others fell under the captivating charm of Aphrodite. Zeus, the father of the universe, did not want to personally take a side in this divine quarrel and fill his own palace and home with unrest and fights. He thought for a long time, saw the future, and realizing that he could not get out of this matter with his own name, decided to delegate the arbitration far away from Olympus to a mortal. The person he chose was Paris, the Trojan prince who herded sheep on the slopes of Zeus gave the order to the messenger Hermes, and together with the apple, the three goddesses set off toward the presence of that young shepherd to perform the arbitration. That very day, that golden apple thrown before a shepherd on a mountain peak opened the gates of the rich city of Troy, whose walls were thought to be impenetrable, of a massive Greek armada of thousands of ships, and of a bloody epic that would completely change the course of history and be passed down from tongue to tongue for centuries. It all started with just an apple. Chapter 2: Paris's Choice and the Bribes. While time silently wove the web spun by fate, far from the magnificent halls of Olympus above the clouds, life flowed in an entirely different routine on the slopes of Mount Ida. Although he was the son of King Priam of Troy, Paris, who had been sent away from the palace when he was born and raised as a shepherd in the mountains, was completely unaware that he possessed the power to change the destiny of the world's greatest empires at that moment. He was grazing his flock, listening to the sound of the parched wind, and living out his peaceful life on the slopes of the mountain. Yet the will of the gods would never allow mortals to find peace. Gliding down from the peak of Olympus, the messenger god Hermes left a divine wind in his wake as he fluttered toward the foothills. Following Hermes walked the three most powerful, dazzling, and at the same time most arrogant beings in the universe: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. These goddesses, who stepped out of marble palaces onto the wild lands of the mountain, had practically bewitched all of nature around them. When the young shepherd Paris saw these divine beauties shining brightly before him, he did not know what hit him. His knees weakened, and the shepherd's crook in his hands fell to the ground. Hermes whispered Zeus's will to the young shepherd.
"This golden apple
is entrusted to you to be given to the fairest. You will make the decision. You will be the judge. Those silent and desolate slopes of the mountain suddenly turned into the stage of the universe's greatest bargain. The goddesses sought ways to appeal to the desires of a mortal shepherd in order to win that flawless apple and ultimate victory. Their arrogance set aside, each put forth the most alluring offer of her own power on the table. First, Hera, the queen of the supreme gods, stepped forward. There was the light of empires in her eyes and the weight of crowns in her voice. She took a step toward Paris and whispered the magnitude of the power she promised. "Choose me, shepherd. If you give the apple to me, I grant you absolute dominion over all the lands of Asia and Europe, to be the king of kings and a boundless power whose name will never leave lips. The richest throne in the world shall be yours." Paris hesitated for a moment with the dream of that massive power and endless wealth offered by Hera. But immediately afterward, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, stepped in. Looking with eyes holding the cold gleam of steel, Athena carried the scent of victory and clever maneuvers. She stood right in front of Paris and made that offer that pierced his mind. "Power is temporary. Thrones fall. Choose me, Paris. If the apple is given to me, I grant you the grace of never being defeated on battlefields, an unimaginable intellect, and a flawless strategic genius whose name will be written in golden letters in epics of heroism. You shall become an immortal legend." As the wind increased its fury on the mountain slopes, finally Aphrodite, the crownless queen of love and desire, stepped forward. There was a devilish yet equally enchanting, breathtaking smile on her face. Her steps were so delicate and her scent so seductive that even the wild flowers around her were leaning toward her. She approached Paris, placed her hand on the young man's shoulder, and whispered those toxic words that sealed fate. Kingdoms turn to dust. Wars are forgotten. Power and intelligence leave a person lonely. Choose me, shepherd. I offer you the deepest passion you will ever taste in your lifetime, that pure desire that makes hearts tremble violently. The most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, Queen of Sparta. I shall seal her to your heart. He will be yours. Paris wanted neither the throne of Asia nor the glory of battlefields. At that moment, he fell under the spell of that forbidden and flawless beauty promised by Aphrodite. He averted his eyes, his hands trembled, and he made that fatal decision that would bring about the end of the universe. He handed the apple to Aphrodite, the goddess of love who was smiling proudly. At that very second, the storm that broke out on top of Mount Ida did not merely end the contest of the three goddesses. It signed the decree for thousands of ships that would anchor at the walls of Troy, blood that would flow in streams, and lands that would be watered with Helen's tears. That passion falling into the mind of a shepherd was enough to set an entire civilization on fire. The Chapter 3, The Palace of Sparta and the Abduction of Helen, with the awarding of the golden apple to Aphrodite on the desolate and windy slopes of Mount Ida, the irreversible wheels of the universe had begun to turn rapidly. Paris had completely surrendered himself with all his being to that fascinating future promised by the goddess of love. However, that small passion falling into the heart of a shepherd would soon ignite a massive storm that would turn the entire Mediterranean into a bloody circle of fire. That decision, made under the supervision of the gods, was about to turn into a ruthless reality in the world of mortals. When viewed from the magnificent palaces of Olympus, everything was proceeding as planned. Aphrodite was impatient to keep her promise to the shepherd because Helen, Queen of Sparta and the most beautiful woman in the world, was at that time with another king, Menelaus. Helen's beauty was the talk not only of Greece, but of the entire known world. Thousands of kings had competed with one another to marry her, and they had even signed a massive oath treaty among themselves to prevent any potential future bloody wars. Whoever chose Helen, all others would unite and take revenge against any harm coming to her. From that day on, the name of Helen, daughter of Tyndareus, became the common symbol of fate and swords across all Achaean lands. Backed by the divine support of Aphrodite, Paris left behind his shepherd clothes and set sail for the Mediterranean aboard magnificent ships as the Prince of Troy. As the oars beat the waters, the wind drove the ship straight toward its destination, as if by the command of the gods. His goal was clear: to set foot on the lands of the Spartans and unite his destiny with the most beautiful woman in the world. The marble-pillared gates of the Spartan palace opened wide to a foreign king, the Trojan prince. In accordance with the laws of Xenia hospitality, one of the most sacred rules of the ancient world, the utmost care was shown to the guests. Banquet tables were set and the oldest wines were poured into goblets. While Menelaus, king of Sparta, was warmly hosting his guest, he was completely unaware that he was hosting the greatest disaster that could befall his own hearth, and of the magnitude of the trap laid inside his palace. Yet, as the darkness of night set in, a divine and heavy wind that transcended the will of mortals began to blow through the marble corridors of the palace. The invisible hands of Aphrodite bound the minds and hearts of Helen and Paris together with an intoxicating, irresistible spell. When Helen saw that dangerous passion in the eyes of a foreign prince within her husband's palace, her will had already slipped away from her hands. This dark game plotted by the goddess of love resulted in the heaviest, most unforgivable violation of the rule of hospitality. In the middle of the night, two silhouettes quietly hurried toward the port in the deeply sleeping streets of Sparta. Paris boarded the Trojan ships, taking Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, and a considerable portion of the Spartan palace's treasures with him. This escape, which began like a pure story of love and reunion, was actually the first spark of a great and devastating war that would cause thousands of ships to set sail. When morning came and it was understood that Helen's room in the Spartan palace was empty and she was gone, a freezing and deadly silence fell over the kingdom. The shattering anger of King Menelaus, who had been betrayed and whose honor and pride were trampled underfoot, echoed like a storm across all Greek lands. That great and binding oath sworn years ago in Tyndareus' palace was now coming into play with all its horror. Urgent news was sent out to all Achaean kings. together with his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. Bells of revenge were ringing, and the door was opening to those bloody and painful days when a massive armada of thousands of ships would be prepared. That abduction of a woman, whether consented to or with her will stolen, was now the unchanging decree of a 10-year relentless slaughter and epic siege that would pit two great civilizations against each other. Chapter 4. The Port of Aulis, Iphigenia, and the landing at Troy. While the anger over Helen being abducted from the Spartan palace enveloped all of Greek lands, the Achaean kings gathered as a massive army at the port of Aulis at the call of Agamemnon. Thousands of ships, a navy large enough to block out the sky, bronze-armored heroes, and commanders poised to become legendary were waiting in that port for the wind to blow. However, there was a major obstacle in the way. The seas and winds were standing against them. Goddess Artemis was furious because her sacred prey had been harmed. The winds had completely stopped at the port of Aulis, rendering the navy unable to move. As days chased weeks, unrest grew within the army. Murmurs began to rise among the soldiers, and the patience of hundreds of commanders reached its breaking point. Finally, the seer Calchas listened to the voice of the heavens and revealed the only way to appease the goddess's wrath. Commander-in-Chief Agamemnon had to sacrifice his own flesh and blood, his daughter Iphigenia. That ruthless decision that would shatter a father's heart clashed with a king's ambition and leadership responsibility. Agamemnon consented to lay his daughter on the sacrificial table for the glory of his army, the future of the alliance, and the thirst for the bloody revenge to be taken. As soon as young Iphigenia's blood fell upon the altar in the earth, Artemis's wrath subsided, and those fateful winds began to blow howling once again in the port. The sails swelled with pride, and thousands of ships set sail across the deep blue waters toward Troy. And finally, they docked at those sandy shores in front of Troy's high, seemingly impenetrable thick walls. When the Achaean ships reached the shore, by a twist of fate, the first blood was shed. Protesilaus fulfilled the prophecy, falling to the earth as the first dead man to set foot on the Trojan shore. There was no longer any turning back, no other way out. Behind the walls of Troy, Hector and his family wove a wall of steel to defend their city, while on the opposite shore, Achilles and the fearless Myrmidonians encamped with battle cries. This very shore landing would write the greatest heroes of the Mediterranean in blood for 10 years, sealing the fate of the entire epic until that legendary explosive point of the Iliad, Agamemnon and Achilles' devastating quarrel of wrath.